On July 20th, 356 BCE, in the ancient kingdom of Macedonia, a child was born who would one day change the face of the world. His name was Alexander, Alexander III, later called the Great. Born to King Philip II, a brilliant and ruthless ruler, and Queen Olympias, a woman of fierce ambition and mysterious influence, Alexander's life was destined for greatness. From the very beginning, his parents saw in him a spark unlike any other. Legend has it that on the night of his birth, a lightning bolt struck near the palace, an omen that the child would one day wield unmatched power. Olympias, deeply spiritual and obsessed with omens, believed her son was destined for divinity. Alexander's childhood was extraordinary. He was fearless, energetic, and curious. He tamed a horse no one else could manage, the famous Bucephalus, showing a courage and intelligence that would later define him on the battlefield. Even as a boy, Alexander was surrounded by politics, intrigue, and ambition. His father was forging Macedonia into a superpower, while Olympias taught him that he was destined for immortality. The young prince grew up learning to command respect, observe enemies, and understand the fragile threads of power. From the moment he drew his first breath, the world itself seemed to bend toward his destiny. A conqueror was born, one whose life would be measured not in years, but in empires.
As a boy, Alexander's mind was shaped by one of the greatest philosophers in history, Aristotle. At the age of 13, the young prince began studying under the legendary thinker, who introduced him to philosophy, science, medicine, and literature. Aristotle taught Alexander to think critically, to question, and to observe the world carefully. He read Homer's Iliad with him, and Alexander identified strongly with Achilles, a hero whose courage, ambition, and glory he would later try to emulate. Beyond academics, Aristotle instilled in Alexander a curiosity about the natural world. He studied plants, animals, and geography, fueling a lifelong interest in exploration. The philosopher also encouraged Alexander to value ethics and leadership, lessons he would later apply, sometimes ruthlessly, on the battlefield. Through Aristotle, Alexander gained more than knowledge. He gained vision. He learned to combine intellect with ambition, to see beyond Macedonia, and to imagine an empire that stretched across continents. By the time he returned to the Macedonian court, Alexander was no longer just a prince. He was a thinker, a strategist, and a boy with the destiny of a conqueror.
Alexander's education under Aristotle prepared his mind, but it was the battlefield that would forge his character. Even as a teenager, he demonstrated courage, cunning, and an instinct for command far beyond his years. At just 16, Alexander was left in charge of Macedonia, while his father, King Philip II, waged campaigns elsewhere. In this role, he led troops into battle and swiftly suppressed a rebellion. His decisive victories proved that he was not merely a prince by birth, he was a natural leader. During these early campaigns, Alexander developed his signature style: fearless frontline leadership, brilliant tactical maneuvers, and an uncanny ability to inspire loyalty among his soldiers. Troops admired him not just for his bravery, but for his willingness to share the dangers of war. Alexander also began cultivating a sense of destiny. Stories of his daring exploits spread through Macedonia. His reputation grew. This was no ordinary prince. This was a warrior destined to reshape the world. By the time he reached adulthood, Alexander had already fought in real battles, led armies, and proven himself a strategist. The seeds of conquest were planted, and the young warrior's ambition was only beginning to bloom.
In 335 BCE, shortly after Alexander became king of Macedonia following his father's assassination, the Greek city-state of Thebes rebelled against Macedonian rule. The city believed that with the new, young king on the throne, they could regain independence. Alexander responded swiftly and decisively. He marched his army over 130 miles in just a few days, catching Thebes off guard. When his forces arrived, he offered the citizens a chance to surrender, but Thebes refused. Alexander's response was both ruthless and symbolic. His army stormed the city, crushing the rebellion. Thousands were killed, and the city was largely destroyed. The survivors were sold into slavery. Yet through this brutal action, Alexander sent a clear message to the rest of Greece: defiance would not be tolerated. The destruction of Thebes cemented Alexander's reputation as a formidable ruler. It demonstrated that he could combine speed, strategy, and absolute authority to achieve his goals. Greece, witnessing his decisive action, fell largely into submission. Alexander had not only secured Macedonia's borders, he had asserted his dominance over the entire Greek world. This early display of power foreshadowed the unstoppable force he would become in the campaigns ahead.
In 336 BCE, the Kingdom of Macedonia was thrown into turmoil. King Philip II, Alexander's father, was assassinated at a celebration in Aegea. The young Alexander, just 20 years old, faced a dangerous and uncertain world. Despite his youth, Alexander acted quickly. He was immediately crowned king and moved to consolidate power. Rivals and dissenters within Macedonia and Greece questioned his legitimacy, but Alexander's decisiveness and charisma silenced many doubters. His first acts as king combined strategy and audacity. He eliminated potential threats, secured the loyalty of key generals, and reaffirmed Macedonia's dominance over the Greek city-states. By demonstrating both intelligence and ruthlessness, Alexander made it clear that he would rule not as a boy king, but as a powerful and unyielding leader. With his father gone, Alexander inherited not just a kingdom, but an army trained for conquest and a vision for empire. The stage was set for one of the greatest military campaigns the world had ever seen, a journey that would transform a young Macedonian king into Alexander the Great.
By 334 BCE, Alexander had turned his eyes eastward. The mighty Persian Empire, under King Darius III, controlled vast lands stretching from Asia Minor to Egypt. It was a prize that would test Alexander's genius and ambition. Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia Minor with an army of roughly 35,000 soldiers, a relatively small force compared to Persia's millions. Yet his confidence was unmatched. He combined bold strategy with meticulous planning, moving quickly to secure key territories along the coast and cut off Persian reinforcements. The first major confrontation came at the Granicus River. Alexander led a daring cavalry charge straight into the heart of the Persian forces, risking everything on his personal bravery. His tactics, discipline, and charisma turned the tide, and the Persian army was routed. Victory at Granicus opened the path into Asia Minor and set a precedent. Alexander would fight at the front, sharing danger with his men, inspiring loyalty and fear alike. In the following months, Alexander captured strategic cities, secured supply lines, and spread his influence across the region. Greek cities under Persian control welcomed him as a liberator, and his reputation grew rapidly. Asia Minor was only the beginning. Alexander had demonstrated that he was not just inheriting an empire, but destined to forge one of his own.
One of Alexander's most legendary military feats came in 332 BCE at the Phoenician city of Tyre. This fortified island city resisted his advance, refusing to surrender to the Macedonian king. Tyre seemed almost impregnable. Its walls rose directly from the sea, and the city's harbor protected it from conventional attacks. But Alexander was determined. Refusing to be blocked by geography, he devised a bold plan. He constructed a massive causeway, a bridge of earth and stone, to reach the city walls. For 7 months, Alexander's army worked tirelessly, battling Tyrian defenders, storms, and logistical challenges. The king himself led attacks, inspiring soldiers with his courage and unrelenting ambition. His strategic brilliance combined engineering skill with psychological warfare. When Tyre finally fell, Alexander's ruthlessness became evident. Tens of thousands were killed or enslaved, and the city was leveled, a stark warning to any who dared resist him. The Siege of Tyre showcased Alexander's genius, the ability to combine cunning, determination, and sheer force. It demonstrated that no obstacle, not even an island fortress, could stand against his ambition. After Tyre, the path to Egypt and the heart of the Persian Empire lay open.
In 332 BCE, Alexander entered Egypt, a land long under Persian control. Unlike many conquerors, he was welcomed as a liberator rather than feared as a tyrant. Egyptians saw him as a pharaoh and a godlike figure, fulfilling ancient prophecies of a ruler who would free them from foreign domination. Alexander's time in Egypt was not just about conquest, it was about legacy. He founded the city of Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast, strategically positioned for trade, culture, and learning. The city would become a center of Hellenistic civilization, blending Greek and Egyptian traditions and serving as a testament to Alexander's vision of cultural fusion. In Egypt, he also visited the Oracle of Ammon at Siwa Oasis. There, priests purportedly confirmed his divine status, reinforcing Alexander's belief that he was destined for greatness, a king chosen by the gods themselves. This period revealed another side of Alexander, a leader who understood that conquest alone was not enough. To build an empire, he needed culture, religion, and cities to anchor his influence. Egypt was the first place where his ambition extended beyond war into shaping the world's history and heritage.
In 331 BCE, Alexander faced his greatest challenge yet, the Persian army of King Darius III at Gaugamela. Darius commanded a massive force, reportedly numbering in the hundreds of thousands, while Alexander led a smaller, disciplined army of about 47,000. Despite the odds, Alexander's strategy was brilliant. He used terrain, formation, and timing to his advantage. At the critical moment, he led a decisive cavalry charge directly at Darius, breaking the Persian lines and causing chaos in the enemy ranks. Darius fled the battlefield, leaving his army leaderless. Alexander pursued him relentlessly, demonstrating both tactical genius and an unyielding determination to crush Persia completely. Victory at Gaugamela effectively ended Persian power and cemented Alexander's reputation as one of history's greatest military minds. This battle was not just about territory, it was about legacy. Alexander had shown that skill, strategy, and courage could overcome sheer numbers. After Gaugamela, the road to the Persian heartland and the ultimate conquest of Asia lay open, and Alexander's dream of a vast empire became a tangible reality.
After the decisive victory at Gaugamela in 331 BCE, Alexander's conquest of Persia was far from complete. Darius III, though defeated, had fled eastward, attempting to regroup his forces and rally support from remaining Persian satraps. Alexander pursued Darius relentlessly, combining military skill with political cunning. He sent envoys to persuade Persian governors to surrender peacefully, offering clemency to those who would join his cause. At the same time, he cut off supply lines, destroyed cities that resisted, and maintained pressure on Darius's dwindling forces. The chase led Alexander deep into Persia through cities like Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis. When Alexander finally reached Persepolis, Darius had already been betrayed by his own men. The city, symbolic of Persian pride and power, was eventually burned, a calculated act to both punish and warn future enemies. Alexander's pursuit was not only military, it was political and psychological. By capturing the heart of the Persian Empire and demonstrating both mercy and ruthlessness, he secured loyalty from conquered peoples while crushing resistance. Darius's eventual death at the hands of his own satraps left Alexander as the uncontested ruler of Persia, fulfilling a destiny that had begun with ambition in a Macedonian palace.
In 326 BCE, Alexander marched into India, reaching the banks of the Hydaspes River, where he faced King Porus, a ruler famed for his courage and his army of war elephants. This battle would test Alexander's genius like never before. The terrain was difficult, the river swelled, and Porus's elephants struck fear into the Macedonian soldiers. But Alexander's brilliance lay in strategy. He feigned a frontal attack while secretly crossing the river at night, positioning his troops to strike Porus from an unexpected direction. The clash was brutal. Elephants trampled soldiers, arrows rained down, and Alexander himself led charges at the front. Yet his discipline and tactics prevailed. Porus was defeated, but Alexander, impressed by his opponent's valor, allowed him to retain his kingdom as a loyal satrap. The Battle of the Hydaspes showcased Alexander's adaptability. He confronted unfamiliar terrain, unfamiliar weapons, and unfamiliar tactics, yet turned them to his advantage. It also demonstrated his blend of ruthlessness and respect, a conqueror who could crush his enemies while honoring their courage. Though victorious, the campaign in India revealed the limits of his army. Exhausted by years of continuous warfare, Alexander's troops eventually refused to march further east, marking the easternmost extent of his empire.
Alexander's campaigns were more than battles. They were journeys into the unknown. As he marched through Persia, Central Asia, and India, he encountered lands, peoples, and cultures that were entirely foreign to the Greeks and Macedonians. He meticulously observed geography, rivers, mountains, and deserts, often recording details from maps and reports. His encounters with new peoples were a mix of diplomacy, curiosity, and conquest. He learned local customs, adopted some Persian dress and court rituals, and encouraged his soldiers to marry into local families to strengthen alliances. Alexander's curiosity extended to science and nature. He collected samples of plants and animals, consulted local scholars, and pushed his army into regions that were considered impassable. From the deserts of Gedrosia to the jungles of the Indus, his campaigns were as much explorations of the world as they were of warfare. Through these journeys, Alexander expanded the known world for the Greeks. His vision was not merely to conquer, but to integrate, to understand, and to leave a legacy of cultural fusion. He became not just a general, but an explorer whose campaigns reshaped maps, knowledge, and the very way civilizations saw one another.
One of Alexander's greatest strengths was his ability to inspire loyalty and devotion among his troops. Unlike many rulers who led from a distance, Alexander fought alongside his soldiers, sharing danger, hunger, and exhaustion. This earned him unparalleled respect and obedience. He understood the psychology of leadership. He rewarded bravery, promoted merit over birth, and maintained strict discipline. Soldiers knew that Alexander would never ask them to do something he would not do himself. From charging the front lines to crossing dangerous rivers, he exemplified courage and decisiveness. Alexander also cultivated a personal connection with his men. He listened to their concerns, celebrated their victories, and mourned their losses. This balance of authority and empathy created a bond that transformed his army from a fighting force into a loyal, almost fanatical brotherhood. This loyalty was critical in campaigns where the army faced extreme conditions, unknown terrain, and formidable enemies. Alexander's charisma and leadership allowed him to command respect, manage dissent, and keep his men motivated on campaigns that lasted years. Through this bond, Alexander turned a disciplined Macedonian army into an unstoppable force, a reflection of both his genius as a strategist and his understanding of human nature.
Behind the legend of Alexander the Great was a man of complex relationships, passions, and personal bonds. His life was not only shaped by war and conquest, but also by the people closest to him. Alexander formed deep connections with his companions, most famously Hephaestion, his lifelong friend and confidant. Their bond was legendary, marked by loyalty, trust, and mutual respect. And Hephaestion's death later devastated Alexander. In matters of love, Alexander married several women to secure political alliances. He married Roxana, a Bactrian princess whose loyalty he valued greatly, and later took two more wives, Statera II and Parysatis II, daughters of Persian royalty, to strengthen ties with his newly conquered empire. These marriages reflected both strategic planning and personal desire. Alexander also valued mentorship and counsel from his inner circle, including generals like Parmenion, Craterus, and Perdiccas. However, these relationships were fraught with tension and sometimes betrayal, as loyalty, ambition, and suspicion often collided in his court. Through these bonds of friendship, love, and loyalty, Alexander navigated the human side of power. While his conquests reshaped the world, it was these personal relationships that shaped the man behind the legend, revealing a side both vulnerable and profoundly human.
Alexander's court was a place of power, intrigue, and constant tension. As king of Macedonia and later of a vast empire, he had to navigate rivalries, political schemes, and the ambitions of those around him. His temper was legendary. Insults, perceived disloyalty, or challenges to his authority could provoke swift and sometimes brutal reactions. Yet this intensity was balanced by his charisma and ability to inspire awe. Courtiers, generals, and soldiers alike were drawn to his vision and personal magnetism. Rivalries were a constant threat. Alexander dealt decisively with dissent, whether it came from ambitious generals or members of the royal family. He was both forgiving and ruthless, depending on how loyalty and usefulness aligned with his goals. At the same time, his court was a melting pot of cultures. Persian nobles, Greek philosophers, and Macedonian generals coexisted under his rule, reflecting Alexander's broader vision of cultural fusion. He encouraged blending traditions, adopting aspects of Persian dress and customs, which sometimes angered his Macedonian soldiers but helped secure loyalty in conquered lands. The Macedonian court was a reflection of Alexander himself, brilliant, volatile, ambitious, and visionary. Here, the seeds of empire were nurtured, but so too were the tensions that would challenge his authority and test the limits of loyalty.
Alexander the Great did not simply seek to conquer lands. He envisioned a world united under a single culture, blending East and West. This vision of a Hellenistic empire aimed to merge Greek ideas, governance, and art with the traditions of the lands he conquered. He encouraged his soldiers to marry local women, adopted Persian dress and court customs, and integrated Persian officials into his administration. Cities like Alexandria in Egypt became centers of learning and cultural exchange, embodying his goal of fusion. Alexander's ambition extended beyond politics. He promoted the spread of Greek language, philosophy, and science across Asia, establishing schools, libraries, and marketplaces where cultures could mix. His policy of respecting local religions and traditions while introducing Greek institutions created a new era of cosmopolitan governance. This vision was revolutionary. By blending cultures rather than simply imposing Greek ways, Alexander planted the seeds for the Hellenistic age, where art, science, and philosophy flourished across continents. Though his empire would fragment after his death, his dream of a connected world left a lasting legacy that shaped civilizations for centuries.
In 326 BCE, Alexander's army reached the Hyphasis River, modern Bias River, in India, marking the easternmost point of his conquests. After years of continuous campaigning, the soldiers were exhausted, facing unfamiliar terrain, monsoon rains, and the threat of powerful local armies. Despite Alexander's ambition to push further into India, his troops refused to march any farther. They had endured countless battles, long marches, and harsh conditions. For the first time, the Macedonian soldiers openly mutinied, forcing Alexander to reconsider his plans. This moment revealed the human limits of conquest. Even the greatest leader could not bend men beyond their endurance. Alexander, though disappointed, respected the will of his army, demonstrating pragmatism alongside his relentless ambition. The mutiny marked a turning point. Alexander began the long journey home, consolidating his empire and focusing on governance, cultural integration, and planning for the future. The episode at the Hyphasis showed that even a man destined for greatness had to navigate the realities of human endurance and loyalty.
After defeating Darius III at Gaugamela and pursuing him across Persia, Alexander faced the final collapse of the Persian Empire. Darius was betrayed and killed by his own satrap, leaving Alexander as the uncontested ruler of Persia. Alexander's response was notable for its combination of political acumen and mercy. He honored Darius's family, treating them with respect, and used the gesture to gain legitimacy in the eyes of the Persian people. By integrating former Persian officials into his administration, Alexander secured stability and reduced resistance in his newly conquered territories. The fall of Persia marked the culmination of a decade of relentless conquest. Alexander had toppled the most powerful empire of the age, but he also demonstrated that rulership required more than victory on the battlefield. Political consolidation, diplomacy, and strategic clemency were essential tools in building a lasting empire. With Persia subdued, Alexander's ambitions shifted further east, and his vision of a unified Hellenistic world moved closer to reality.
After years of campaigning across Asia, Alexander began his journey back to Babylon, the heart of his empire. The return was not merely a retreat, but a period of consolidation, planning, and administration. Alexander faced the enormous challenge of managing a vast, culturally diverse empire stretching from Greece to India. He implemented systems to integrate conquered peoples, appointed trusted generals and local rulers to govern regions, and encouraged cultural fusion to maintain stability. Along the way, he founded new cities, spread Greek culture, and established trade routes to connect distant regions. Alexander also continued to lead by example, sharing hardships with his troops and maintaining the loyalty that had driven his previous victories. The journey home revealed the other side of Alexander's genius, the ability to balance conquest with governance, ambition with pragmatism. While he had conquered the known world, he understood that the survival of his empire depended on organization, diplomacy, and vision. Babylon became the center of his empire, a symbol of his authority, and the starting point for plans that would continue to shape the ancient world, even as Alexander's health and the limits of mortality began to loom over his legacy.
In 323 BCE, at just 32 years old, Alexander the Great died in Babylon under mysterious circumstances. Some accounts suggest fever from malaria or typhoid, while others hinted poisoning, though evidence remains inconclusive. His death left an empire without a clear successor. Generals and governors, once loyal, began vying for power, eventually dividing the empire into rival kingdoms. Alexander's vision of a unified, Hellenistic world would fracture, but his influence endured. Even in death, Alexander's legacy loomed large. He had conquered the known world, spread Greek culture across continents, and inspired countless leaders, philosophers, and historians. Cities like Alexandria became centers of learning and culture, ensuring his impact lasted for centuries. The mystery surrounding his death only added to his legend. Alexander the Great, the boy prince, the fearless warrior, and visionary ruler became immortal, not just in history books, but in the imagination of the world. His life showed that ambition, genius, and courage could reshape the course of humanity, leaving a story that continues to captivate us to this day.
There is nothing impossible to him who will try. A testament to his relentless ambition and belief in human potential, Alexander inspired his troops and himself with this unwavering confidence. I am not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I am afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. Reflecting his understanding of leadership, courage, and vision outweigh mere numbers or brute strength. Remember, upon the conduct of each depends the fate of all. Alexander valued responsibility and discipline, emphasizing that individual actions shaped collective destiny. I would rather live a short life of glory than a long one of obscurity. This illustrates his relentless pursuit of greatness, preferring impact over longevity. Heaven cannot brook two sons, nor earth two masters. Spoken after his victory over Darius III, asserting his claim as the undisputed ruler of Persia. I am indebted to my father for living, but to my teacher for living well. A tribute to Aristotle, acknowledging the role of education and guidance in shaping his greatness. An army of the brave is like a fire. It can be subdued, but never extinguished. Reflecting his admiration for courage and the spirit of his soldiers. With the right knowledge, the world can be moved. Demonstrating his belief in strategy, intellect, and vision as forces equal to physical might. I would rather excel in knowledge than be merely a ruler of men, showing the philosophical side of Alexander, blending conquest with curiosity. There is no such thing as too great an ambition, the ultimate expression of his life philosophy that limits exist only for those unwilling to challenge them.